Guys, for my discussion this week, I chose the topic of partnerships, um, which I talked a little bit about in the textbook. So why I chose this topic, I think it's very important to understand the importance of partnerships, both with clients and among other social workers. When we did the social work assignment, I was thinking a lot about working with other social workers and how that was important. Um, but also, working with clients and understanding the importance of that partnership. Um, and so I chose that topic for that reason because I wanted to learn more about partnerships with clients and with other social workers and how this can be a benefit to social work as a whole. A little bit of background information on partnerships. In the textbook, it talked about how it is very important how the relationships are formed for partnerships and how the beginning of a relationship, with a client or with another social worker is very dependent on, that first interaction, and it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. It also talked about how important professional relationships were and how we're supposed to differentiate, our professional relationships from our personal relationships. I also think that one important thing that the book mentioned was the difference between voluntary and mandated clients, and how there are some clients that want help and there are some clients that need help but don't necessarily want it. And I think that's something to keep in mind for sure, as we're going into social work and understanding that people have different experiences and they want to get different things out of social work. It also talks about the importance of having certain skills when we're developing relationships with clients and stuff. And in order to develop these positive relationships, we need to have certain qualities such as empathy, genuineness, positive regard, and respecting diversity and differences and everything like that. Okay, so the first article that I found was called News Organization Partnerships and Collaborations. So obviously this wasn't directly related to social work, but I think it was still a super great resource because it talked about how partnership kind of in the real world, in a worldview sense, how these partnerships are important and how to best facilitate these partnerships in different ways that are different than social work. So some key points from the article. It talks about how there are different types of partnerships in the world and that they need to be navigated differently depending on like the discipline and just like the kind of the goals and the efforts of the partnerships. So this article in particular, we're talking about journalism partnerships, which I know doesn't seem super related to social work, but reading the article, I was like, okay, a lot of this relates back to the textbook and relates back to social work and I had to think about how these things could be applied to social work. So one of these things that I thought was similar to, partnerships in social work is that motivation is very important to partnerships. It's important to understand that there are different goals and different motivations that can, start a partnership, but that these motivations are very important. Kind of going back to the voluntary versus mandated clients, it's going to be it might be challenging to have mandated clients because their motivation isn't there. They need the help, but they're not necessarily motivated to get that help because of their situation. So that can make things difficult if you guys don't have the same motivation in a partnership. Another key aspect was the realization that things may go wrong. I thought this was super interesting because I was reading the article and I was like, what the heck? But I think it's actually a super good point that, we have these high expectations and, just these goals for what we think our partnerships may be, but they might not necessarily go super well. So I think it's important to realize that, yeah, things might go wrong. They might not go as planned or the way that we want them to. That's okay. One of the other important points from the first article is that quality is very important. I think, this is super applicable to social work. I mean, not necessarily quality over quantity, but kind of in that sense that it's very important to have meaningful partnerships and relationships with clients and with other social workers in order to, have those beneficial relationships. And one of the last points was that shared work means increase. I really like this little quote that, when we work together, and bring our different viewpoints, bring our different perspectives, that it can increase our knowledge and our perspective, and it can be very beneficial to us. Okay, so my next article was called Active Collaboration with Clients, an Underemphasized but Vital Part of Evidence-Based Practice. This is something I hadn't really heard of before, but it's called the Evidence-Based Practice Model, and it's for social work, and there's different steps in it that, for how social workers can, make decisions and, try to solve their clients' problems with evidence-based practice. But the fourth step in these steps is discussing relevant research results with the client, which definitely relates back to the idea of collaboration and partnership with clients, because you're supposed to talk with your clients about the things that are going on and the research that you found and your results and everything like that, and collaborate with them. And one important thing from the article is that you should speak in terms and like language that the client would understand, just because you may have knowledge that they do not, but in the partnership and in the collaboration, it's very important that they understand what's going on and what certain things mean. Another important point from this article is that the client choice and agency is more important than the research findings. So although there is this relationship between you and the client, it's important to realize that ultimately the client has the ultimate say at the end of the day, and that despite what our research may say, it's up to the client for what the decision should be made in any circumstance. But also this EBP process gives priority to the clinical expertise of the practitioner. So it gives, the practitioner, or I guess the social worker, it gives them the opportunity to inform the client and point out the different things that are going on, the challenges they might face, as well as their experiences and their opportunities. And I think that's something that's super important in terms of partnership, to realize that there are different perspectives and different viewpoints that can go into the partnership. And it's really important to have those relationships so that we can, get different perspectives and get different viewpoints and, bring our thoughts together for hopefully a positive results at the end. And one quote that I liked from this article is that patient-centered care is a quality of personal, professional, and organizational relationships. This article talked a lot about how, the patient is ultimately the center of all the discussions. And even though there is a mutual partnership, that the client does, have not superiority, but kind of in that sense, they have more of a say than the social worker does or the practitioner does, just because the care is patient-centered and it's, trying to build relationships that will benefit the client. All right, so for the code of ethics for these two articles, I thought that competence and importance of human relationships were very important for partnerships. Just competence in terms of how social workers should strive to, increase their professional knowledge and apply it to their work, and be able to apply it to their client, and, understand that these partnerships are very important, and take what they know and, bring their knowledge to that partnership. And also for human relationships, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but relationships between people can be very beneficial and, a vehicle for social change. And so in these relationships and these partnerships, that should be the ultimate goal. So yeah, back to compare and contrast the two articles. Obviously the first article was not necessarily focused on social work, although there were some aspects that could be applied to social work, but it had a more specific focus of partnerships, and it was kind of in terms of business and journalism and everything like that. And I talked a lot about the motivation of partnerships being purely economic, which is very different from the social work article, because, ideally, social work should not be an economic thing, and it should not be, partnerships should not be aiming to, gain economic gain. So that's different from the second article, because the second article also talks about social work in particular, whereas the other article did not, and it used specific research that was involved in social work, as well as it just talked about research and how research was very important for social work and for partnerships and for the relationship between clients and social workers. Um, and the second article also had a specific aspect to social work, which was the EBP, the evidence-based practice, and it discussed how this related back to partnerships and collaborations between clients and social workers. So then the comparisons between the two articles. First, I thought something that was similar was that quality is important. The first article pretty blatantly said that quality was important, but the second article more loosely talked about, how it's important to make sure that the client is happy and that they're benefited in the relationship and in the partnership. Um, Another similarity is that partnership and collaboration are essential to working well with others. I think that's just part of human life that we need to work with others, and it's good to see that this can be super beneficial and that there are ways to make sure that our relationships and our partnerships are beneficial and that every party involved is, gaining these benefits. Um, and then the last similarity is that some things need to be done together. So there are things that we can't do alone. There are things that clients can't do by themselves. There are things that social workers can't do by themselves. So it's very important to have that relationship between social workers and clients and to see how these can benefit both parties and, hopefully have some positive impact on both parties. Okay, so for my question, it's how can we ensure that partnerships with clients and other social workers are effective and producing quality results? Kind of wanted to like bring together parts of all the different articles. So, partnerships between clients and social workers are both important. And then how can we make sure that they're effective and that they have quality results? So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for listening.